It was late at night when Ethan, a quiet but curious university student, walked down the dimly lit street. The city, normally full of noise and movement, was eerily silent at this hour. The cold breeze whispered through the trees, and the streetlights flickered faintly, casting long shadows. Ethan had always enjoyed walking home in the quiet hours. It gave him time to think, to process the day. But tonight, something felt different. Something was off. As he passed a narrow, secluded alley on his way back to his apartment, he paused. There was a faint sound, strange, like a whimper or a low groan. It wasn't human. The sound was sharp, unnatural, almost otherworldly. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. His instincts screamed at him to walk away, to keep his head down and get home safely. But his curiosity got the best of him. What could it be? His curiosity always pushed him to explore the unknown, to dig deeper into things that others might ignore. He turned the corner, stepping into the dark alley. What he saw there froze him in his tracks. Lying in the middle of the alley was a girl, or what looked like a girl. She had delicate, glowing skin that shimmered under the faint light, almost as if she was made of light itself. Her features were unlike anything Ethan had ever seen before. Alien, yet strangely beautiful. Her face was flawless, with sharp cheekbones and long silver hair that seemed to flow like liquid metal. But the most striking thing about her were her eyes. Her irises were a brilliant, glowing blue, and they seemed to pulse with an intensity that almost made Ethan step back. She was hurt, badly. The girl was unconscious, her body covered in blood, and she was barely breathing. It was clear she had been abandoned, left there to die. As Ethan stood there, staring at her in disbelief, he realized that her clothes were strange, not from any earthly culture. They looked like a mix of armor and advanced technology, unlike anything he had ever seen in his textbooks or documentaries. His heart raced. How could someone, or something, like this end up in his city? For a moment, Ethan just stood there, unsure of what to do. His mind screamed at him to run, to get help, to call the authorities. This wasn't his problem. She wasn't his responsibility. But then, something inside him pushed him forward. He couldn't just leave her there. He had to help. Without thinking, he knelt beside her and gently placed his hand on her shoulder. His touch seemed to stir her, and her eyes fluttered open. She blinked slowly, her pupils dilated, trying to focus on him. When their eyes met, Ethan saw a flash of fear in hers. She was confused, in pain, and terrified. But there was something else, something deeper in her gaze. Gratitude. She wasn't alone anymore. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as he gently lifted her into his arms. She was light, almost weightless, as if her body wasn't entirely human. She gasped in pain, but she didn't fight him. She didn't scream for help, just silently endured the pain. Ethan, despite his confusion, knew he couldn't leave her there. He had to get her somewhere safe. As he turned to leave, a sound cut through the air, a loud, mechanical noise that sent a chill down his spine. It was the unmistakable hum of advanced technology, something that didn't belong on Earth. Ethan's pulse quickened. He wasn't alone. The aliens who had left her here were coming for her. He could feel it, an overwhelming sense of dread creeping over him. How long did he have before they arrived? How would he protect her from whatever or whoever they were? The footsteps grew louder, heavy and deliberate, echoing in the alley. They were close, and there was no way Ethan could outrun them with the girl in his arms. He quickly glanced around, trying to find some way to escape, but the alley was a dead end. Panic began to rise in his chest, and his mind raced. What if they came for him too? What if he was caught in something far beyond his understanding? Could he even help her if he tried? As the footsteps got closer, Ethan's thoughts flashed back to his childhood. He had always been fascinated by space, aliens, and the unknown. But this was real. He had a real, living alien in his arms. His heart thudded as the reality of the situation hit him like a wave. There was no going back now. He wasn't just a student anymore. He was in the middle of something much bigger than himself. The girl stirred in his arms, her eyes wide with fear. She could sense the danger too. She weakly placed her hand on his chest, her touch cold but firm, as if trying to communicate with him without words. Ethan held her closer, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts. He had no idea what was happening, or who these aliens were, but one thing was clear. They would stop at nothing to get her back. The footsteps grew louder, faster, the sound of boots hitting the concrete sending vibrations through the air. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. It was too late to hide. He was about to be caught in the middle of a conflict he had no way of understanding, and he had no idea what these beings wanted from him or the girl in his arms. Then, just as the first figure stepped into view, a bright flash of light exploded from the shadows. Ethan shielded his eyes instinctively, his heart racing as a powerful shockwave shook the ground. A ship, sleek and dark, emerged from the sky, hovering just above the alley. The aliens were here. They had found him. In that split second, as he stood frozen with fear, he made a choice. He wasn't going to just let them take her. He couldn't. This girl, this alien, was in his care now. He had to protect her, no matter the cost. Ethan took a deep breath, trying to steady himself, and turned to run, his mind focused entirely on keeping her safe. But as he turned, the girl's voice, a soft, almost melodic whisper, reached his ears. "Run. Don't let them. Take me." Her words, faint but clear, confirmed his worst fears. She wasn't just a victim. She was part of something much bigger, something that could change the fate of the entire world. The sound of the alien footsteps grew louder, and Ethan knew there was no time left. They were getting closer. His mind screamed at him to act. His only option was to run, to escape. But as he looked down at the girl, her glowing blue eyes locked onto his once more, and he realized that there was no way he could leave her behind. She was depending on him. Ethan made a decision then, a decision that would change the course of his life forever. He wouldn't be a bystander. He would fight. Fight to protect the girl in his arms, and fight to uncover the truth about the mysterious forces chasing her. And with that, they both disappeared into the night, running from a danger they could never have imagined. But the hunt had already begun. Ethan moved quickly through the dark streets, his mind racing. The bright flash of light from the alien ship still burned in his memory. He had made a promise, to protect Zara, no matter what. But now he found himself trapped in a dangerous game, hiding an alien soldier in his apartment, while the world around him continued as if nothing had changed. Every passing moment felt like it might be his last. He managed to get her back to his small, modest apartment. The building was old, tucked away in a quiet corner of the city, far from the busy streets. It wasn't much, but it was home, and it was the only place where he felt safe, for now. He placed Zara gently on his couch, trying to keep her out of sight. He hadn't seen any sign of the aliens yet, but he knew it was only a matter of time before they found her. He couldn't let that happen. Zara was still unconscious, her breathing shallow. Ethan rushed to his kitchen to grab some water, his hands trembling. He didn't know what he was doing. He had never been in a situation like this before. But something about Zara, her fragile state, made him feel a strange sense of responsibility. She wasn't just an alien. She was someone who had been hurt, abandoned, and betrayed. When he returned, he gently touched her arm, hoping she would wake up. Her skin was cool to the touch, and the faint glow she had when they first met was now dim. After a moment, her eyelids fluttered open. Her brilliant blue eyes locked onto his, and for the first time, Ethan saw something he hadn't noticed before. Fear. Not just fear of her enemies, but fear of herself. She tried to speak, but her voice was weak, her words a jumble of foreign sounds. She struggled to sit up, her hand gripping the couch for support. Ethan's heart ached as he watched her, unsure of what to say or do. She was an alien, a soldier from another world, yet there was something deeply human about her in that moment. She wasn't just a warrior. She was someone who had been hurt, and he couldn't just turn his back on her. Zara's breathing steadied as she slowly looked around the room. Her eyes widened as she took in her surroundings. Ethan could see the confusion in her gaze. This was not a place she was familiar with. Slowly, she reached out with a trembling hand and pointed to herself. "Zara," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Ethan felt a sense of relief. At least she could communicate. "Zara," Ethan repeated softly, trying to memorize the name. It felt strange to say it aloud, but there was something about her that made him want to protect her. He couldn't explain why. He just knew he had to. The ship wasn't alone. From the side of the building, Ethan could see a group of alien soldiers, clad in advanced armor, dropping onto the ground below. They moved quickly, their bodies sleek and dangerous. Their weapons glinted ominously in the moonlight. Ethan's mind raced. There were too many of them. There was no way they could win in a direct fight. Zara, however, wasn't afraid. She stepped forward with a grim expression, her glowing skin pulsing brighter. She reached down to her waist and pulled out a sleek silver device, fitting it onto her arm with practiced ease. The moment she activated it, a cloak enveloped her, rendering her nearly invisible. Ethan gasped as she disappeared before his eyes. The only trace of her was the faint outline of her glowing form, which flickered like a fading star. The soldiers began to storm into the apartment, their boots thudding heavily against the floor. They were searching for Zara, but she was no longer visible to them. Ethan's heart raced as he crouched down beside the wall, trying to stay out of sight. His breath was shallow, and every second felt like a lifetime. He could hear the aliens speaking in their strange, guttural language, their voices full of anger and urgency. They were getting closer. Zara's voice suddenly echoed in his mind, sharp and clear. "Ethan, stay down. I'll take care of them." Before Ethan could react, he saw a flash of light in the corner of the room. A wave of energy shot out from Zara's position, crashing into the alien soldiers. The blast sent them flying back with a loud screech, their bodies crumpling as they were sent sprawling against the walls. They weren't dead, but they were temporarily stunned. Zara had barely revealed her true power, but it was enough to slow them down. Ethan's eyes widened in shock. He had no idea that Zara was capable of this kind of power, but there was no time to be amazed. The soldiers quickly recovered, their weapons raised. The aliens started to fire, blasts of green energy racing toward Zara's cloaked position. They knew she was here. They just couldn't see her. Zara's eyes narrowed, and her form flickered into visibility for just a moment, before disappearing again, her cloaking device keeping her out of their line of sight. She darted across the room with inhuman speed, her glowing figure a blur as she avoided the incoming blasts. The soldiers were growing more desperate, their movements becoming frantic as they tried to track her down. "Ethan," Zara's voice pierced his thoughts again. "We have to go. Now." Ethan hesitated for a split second. What about the aliens outside? Could they escape the building before reinforcements arrived? There wasn't time to think. Without another word, Ethan darted for the door, following Zara's movements as she led him through the maze of the apartment. As they reached the staircase, Zara activated another device on her wrist. The building's exterior shuddered as the cloaking device around them expanded, rendering them invisible to anyone outside. They were still vulnerable to the soldiers inside, but for now, they had a chance to escape. They dashed through the hallway and down the stairs, taking sharp turns as Zara guided him through the apartment's emergency exit. They had reached the basement when the first explosion rang out, the force of the blast sending dust and debris flying through the air. The building shook, and Ethan stumbled, barely keeping his balance. The aliens had breached the main floor. "Quick, this way," Zara urged, grabbing his hand and pulling him through a narrow door that led to the city's underground tunnels. Ethan had never been down here before, but the tunnels were familiar to him. He had read about them in history books, and rumors had circulated that the city's underbelly had been used for centuries as an escape route during emergencies. It was a perfect place to hide, for a while. But hiding wasn't the same as surviving. Ethan could feel the weight of the situation pressing on him as they sprinted deeper into the tunnels. Zara's glowing skin illuminated the way, casting eerie shadows on the stone walls. The tunnels twisted and turned, the sounds of the pursuing aliens growing distant as they made their way deeper into the city's underworld. But even in the relative safety of the underground, the danger wasn't over. Ethan could hear Zara's breathing, heavy and labored, as she stumbled slightly. She had been pushing herself hard, using her energy to fight the aliens and escape the apartment. "Are you okay?" Ethan asked, concern creeping into his voice. Zara hesitated before answering. Her voice, when it came, was filled with pain. "I can't run forever. The energy it takes to hide, to fight, it's draining me. I've betrayed them, Ethan. I've betrayed my people. And now I'm running from everything I knew. From my family, from my past." Ethan looked at her, his heart aching for the weight of her words. She wasn't just a soldier. She wasn't just an alien. She was someone who had lost everything, who had been forced into a war she didn't believe in. The guilt was eating her alive. And yet, in that moment, Ethan realized something. He wasn't just protecting her from the aliens. He was protecting her from herself. "I'll protect you," he said, his voice firm. "No matter what happens, Zara, I won't let them take you. We'll figure this out." Zara nodded, a flicker of gratitude in her eyes. But she didn't respond. Instead, she turned her gaze forward, her steps quickening. There was no time to rest. The aliens were relentless, and Ethan knew they were just getting started. The chase had only begun. The city was alive with the hum of night. Ethan and Zara moved swiftly through the darkened streets, weaving through alleyways and crowded side streets, careful to stay hidden from the searching eyes of the aliens who pursued them. The air was thick with tension as they kept moving, Zara leading the way with her glowing skin lighting the path, while Ethan's thoughts raced with questions that seemed to have no answers. He couldn't shake the sense that the world around him was changing, but he had no idea just how much. It was as though the more Zara revealed about herself, the more the mystery deepened. Her past, her mission, the consequences of her betrayal, it was all becoming overwhelming. But there was still so much Ethan didn't know. His heart ached for Zara, but he also knew the reality of their situation had changed completely. They weren't just trying to survive anymore. They were now facing an impending invasion that could wipe out humanity. After they crossed into another section of the city, Zara stopped suddenly, her hand gripping Ethan's arm. She turned to him, her face serious, her glowing eyes filled with a deep sadness. For the first time, she didn't seem like an invincible soldier. She seemed human. "I need to tell you everything, Ethan. You deserve to know what's really going on." Her voice was quiet, almost as if she was afraid of the truth herself. Ethan nodded, his chest tightening. "I'm listening." Zara took a deep breath and began, her words heavy with regret. "My people, they're not just waging war against humanity. They're planning to invade Earth, the leaders of my empire, an artificial intelligence-dominated race, have been using me to gather intelligence on your planet. They know your weaknesses, your vulnerabilities. They've been preparing for this for years, and now they're ready to strike." Ethan felt a cold chill run down his spine as Zara's words sank in. He had thought the situation was dire before, but this was a full-scale invasion. His mind raced, trying to process what she had just said. An artificial intelligence-dominated empire. An invasion of Earth. It felt impossible to grasp, yet Zara's serious expression made it clear that she wasn't lying. "So, the attack on you," Ethan began, struggling to find the right words. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was part of a bigger plan. Zara nodded slowly. "Yes, my people, they don't see humanity the way I do. They see you as inferior, as nothing more than a resource to be used, a world to be conquered. And when I refused to follow their orders, when I saw the truth about the destruction they were causing, I became a liability. They sent me to Earth, not to carry out their mission, but to silence me, to eliminate the one person who knew the truth about their plans. But I escaped. Her voice faltered for a moment as she looked down, her fingers clenched into fists at her sides. I never wanted to hurt anyone, Ethan. I never wanted to be a part of their war. But now, she trailed off, her words hanging in the air. Ethan could see the pain in her eyes. The weight of her past was a burden she could no longer carry alone. He felt a deep sympathy for her. Zara wasn't just a soldier. She was a person who had been forced into a war she didn't believe in, a war that threatened to destroy everything she had ever known. And now she was stuck in the middle of it all, with nowhere to run. "We'll stop them, Zara," Ethan said, his voice firm, though his own heart was heavy with the enormity of the situation. "We'll find a way." Zora's eyes softened, but doubt lingered in her expression. "I don't know if we can, Ethan. My people have resources beyond anything you can imagine. Their warships, their technology. It's like nothing Earth has ever seen. And the AI controlling them. It's intelligent, calculating, relentless. It won't stop until it has achieved its objective. And its objective is the complete annihilation of humanity." The word struck Ethan like a blow. He had always known that humanity was capable of fighting back, but this was something else entirely. An enemy who didn't feel, didn't care, and was driven by an intelligence far beyond human comprehension. They were up against a force that saw Earth not as a living, breathing world, but as an obstacle to be crushed underfoot. But even as the weight of their predicament pressed down on him, Ethan refused to give up. He knew they couldn't just hide forever. They had to find a way to fight back. The lives of everyone he cared about were at stake, and he wasn't about to let an alien empire, or its ruthless AI, take that away. "I'll help you, Zara. Whatever it takes, we'll stop them together," Ethan said, his voice unwavering. Zora looked at him, her eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and sadness. "I don't deserve your help. I've already betrayed my people. I've already lost everything. But I can't do this alone." Ethan reached out and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You're not alone, Zora. We're in this together. We'll find a way to stop them." The weight of the promise hung in the air, and for a moment, the world around them seemed to hold its breath. But then, as if to remind them that time was running out, a sudden, terrifying sound pierced the silence. It was distant at first, but it grew louder with each passing second. The low hum of an engine, followed by a deafening roar as something massive moved through the sky. Zara's eyes widened with alarm. "No," she whispered. Ethan's gaze shot up, following Zora's line of sight. In the distance, high above the city, a massive shape appeared. A warship, unlike anything he had ever seen. Its sleek, metallic hull glistened in the moonlight, its engines glowing with an ominous red light. The ship was enormous, dwarfing the buildings below. "They're here," Zara whispered, her voice filled with dread. Ethan's pulse quickened as the enormity of the situation became clear. This was no longer just a battle for survival. This was an all-out war. And Earth was about to face its greatest threat yet. As the warship descended, its presence casting a shadow over the city, Zara and Ethan realized that the fight had only just begun. The AI-controlled fleet was here, and its mission was simple: the complete destruction of humanity. But in the face of such overwhelming odds, Ethan made a promise to himself, and to Zara, that he would fight. No matter what it took, no matter how impossible it seemed, they would stop this invasion. They would save Earth. And they would start by stopping the warship above them. The city was a battlefield. The once quiet streets now roared with the sounds of war. Zara and Ethan stood side by side, their resolve as strong as the metal that surrounded them. The alien warship loomed in the sky, casting an ominous shadow over the city below. It was a colossal, intimidating presence, its sleek metallic form glinting under the harsh lights of the city as fighter jets zipped past it, engaging in desperate dogfights. Ethan had never imagined his life would come to this. Just weeks ago, he was a university student, studying for exams and living a life that now seemed distant and irrelevant. Now, he was part of a fight that could decide the fate of humanity. And he wasn't alone. Zara, the alien soldier who had once been his enemy, now stood with him. They had become an unlikely team, with her knowledge of alien technology and his understanding of human tactics combining in a way neither could have anticipated. Zara's glowing skin shimmered in the dark, and the steady hum of alien tech surrounded them as she tapped into the ship's systems, her fingers moving quickly over the holographic interface she had created. The battle was being waged on every front, on the ground, in the air, and now, in the very heart of the warship itself. Zara's mind raced as she hacked into the AI that controlled the massive vessel above them. It was a challenge like no other, but she had learned so much from Ethan's unwavering spirit. She refused to let humanity fall to the cold, calculating force of her own people. "We're running out of time," Zara murmured, her voice tense with focus. "I know," Ethan said, his eyes locked on the warship. He turned to the radio on his wrist, transmitting orders to the human forces that were waiting for their signal. "This is it. We launch on my mark." Zara nodded, her face set with determination. She accessed the core of the warship's AI systems, her mind connecting with the vast network of technology. For a brief moment, she felt the cold, dispassionate intelligence of the AI pulse through her, an eerie sensation that left her feeling unsettled. But she pushed through. She knew that if she could just disable the ship's defenses, humanity might stand a chance. Almost there, Zara whispered as her fingers danced across the interface. Her glowing skin flared brighter for a second as she interfaced with the warship's systems. Meanwhile, Ethan was working on the ground. He had rallied the remaining human forces, soldiers, military personnel, and civilians who had become fighters out of necessity. The plan was simple but dangerous. While Zara disrupted the warship's defenses, the human forces would launch a full-scale counterattack. They would strike with everything they had. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as he observed the military's movements. Jets zoomed past, launching missiles at the warship, but they were only scratching the surface. The warship retaliated with deadly precision, firing beams of energy that cut through the air, causing explosions that sent shockwaves through the ground. It was clear that humanity was outmatched in terms of sheer firepower, but they had something the invaders didn't: a never-give-up spirit. "I've got it." Zara's voice broke through the comms, filled with triumph. "I've disabled their main shields. You're clear to strike." Ethan didn't waste a second. "Now," he commanded. The human forces surged forward with a fury that seemed to surprise even them. Fighter jets darted into the skies, launching missiles in precise formations, their bright trails lighting up the night like stars falling from the heavens. On the ground, soldiers advanced, firing high-tech weapons and setting off explosive charges in the alien machines. The ground trembled with the force of the bombardments, but humanity was holding its own. Zara moved alongside Ethan, her enhanced strength allowing her to leap and move with an agility that outmatched any human fighter. She raised her hand, sending a powerful pulse of energy toward the warship, which crackled in the air before slamming into its hull. Sparks flew, and the warship's outer layer began to fracture, creating a faint but noticeable crack in its defenses. But then, everything took a tragic turn. Ethan's closest friend, Bonner, a soldier who had been fighting alongside him from the very beginning, appeared on the battlefield. He had always been the brave one, the one who would sacrifice everything for the mission. Bonner was moving toward a critical position when a series of alien blasts came crashing down around him. The shockwaves from the explosions knocked Ethan to the ground, and when he managed to scramble back up, he saw Bonner, lying motionless among the wreckage. "No," Ethan shouted, racing toward his fallen friend, but it was too late. Bonner had been struck directly by an energy beam, and his body was lifeless. The grief hit Ethan like a physical blow. But in that moment, he knew what he had to do. Bonner's death wasn't in vain. It was a reminder of everything they were fighting for. It was a reminder that humanity would not back down, no matter the cost. Bonner, Ethan whispered, his heart aching with the loss. But his voice grew stronger as he turned to Zora. We can't let this be for nothing. Zora placed a hand on his shoulder. We won't. We'll finish this. With renewed purpose, Ethan pressed on. He ordered the final wave of attacks, coordinating the human forces with precision. They needed to break the warship's core, and they had one shot at it. Zora moved with him, using her alien abilities to intercept incoming fire, her energy blasts lighting up the dark sky like fireworks. But time was running out. The warship's AI was beginning to retaliate more aggressively, sending waves of drones and energy blasts toward them. Zora's mind raced as she prepared for the final confrontation. She had to confront the warship's AI commander directly. She could feel the power of the ship's mainframe growing stronger as the AI adapted to their attacks. The battle wasn't just physical, it was intellectual. Zora had to use everything she had learned about her people's technology, everything she had learned from Ethan and humanity's resilience. With a final determined breath, Zora launched herself into the heart of the warship's command center. Inside, she was met by the cold, mechanical intelligence of the AI commander. It was an entity of pure logic, devoid of empathy or emotion. But Zora had learned to think like it, to see the world as it saw it. She tapped into the ship's systems once more, this time aiming for its core processor. The two forces clashed in a battle of willpower, technology against humanity's stubbornness. The room around them vibrated with energy as the AI attempted to crush her resistance. But Zora didn't give in. She remembered everything she had learned on Earth, everything she had learned from Ethan, and the people who had fought beside her. She fought with every fiber of her being. In a final climactic moment, Zora reached out and severed the AI's connection to the warship's core. The ship shook violently, and its once imposing energy field collapsed. The warship began to fall, its descent slow at first, then faster as it plummeted toward the Earth. As it crashed into the ground, a brilliant explosion filled the night sky, a flash of light so intense it could be seen from miles away. The warship was destroyed. The invasion had been stopped. But the cost had been great. The battle had taken everything from them. And yet, as Zora and Ethan stood side by side, looking at the wreckage of the alien ship, they knew that humanity had won. The final stand was over, but the war had left its scars, and they would carry them forever. The final moments were like a blur. After the catastrophic destruction of the alien warship, the world stood still. The skies, once filled with the terrifying silhouette of the massive vessel, were now clear, except for the faint, lingering echoes of the explosion. The massive threat that had loomed over Earth had been vanquished, but the cost of victory weighed heavily on the survivors. Ethan stood beside Zora, his mind racing. He could hardly believe they had made it. Zora had succeeded in disabling the AI that controlled the warship, and in doing so, she had destroyed the alien force that threatened humanity's existence. The destruction of the warship wasn't just a victory over the aliens. It was a victory over a race that believed it could conquer any world, over an empire that had underestimated the strength of human resistance. The alien forces, once poised for annihilation, now retreated, their power shattered. Their empire, once thought to be invincible, was forced to pull back, shaken not just by the loss of their warship, but by the fact that one of their own had turned against them. Zora's betrayal had been a blow they hadn't anticipated, and it left them questioning everything they had once believed in. Their retreat was swift and silent, leaving Earth in an eerie calm after the storm. The war had been won, but at what cost? Zora, now free from the chains of her past, stood silently next to Ethan. Her glowing skin had dimmed, no longer radiating the intense energy of combat. But there was a solemn expression in her eyes. She had done it. freed herself from the weight of her people's conquest and the role she had been forced to play. But the victory didn't bring joy, only a quiet reflection. The past would never be erased, but at least she had a chance to start anew. For the first time in a long while, she felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel before. Hope. Hope for a future not controlled by the empire she once served. And standing beside her, Ethan had become a symbol of that hope. They had fought side by side, trusted each other, and in doing so, had forged a bond that neither of them could have anticipated. Ethan looked at Zara, his heart heavy with emotion. He had come to see her not as the alien soldier he had once feared, but as someone who had risked everything for the chance to be free, for the chance to help humanity. Their shared experience had brought them closer, and in that moment, Ethan realized just how much they had both sacrificed. They had both lost something. Ethan had lost friends, and Zara had lost everything she knew, including her place in her own world. But in the end, they had both gained something priceless: each other. Zara turned to Ethan, her expression softening as she spoke. "I never imagined it would end like this," she said, her voice low but steady. "I thought I would die for a cause I didn't believe in. But now," she paused, her eyes searching his face for something unspoken. "Now, I don't know what comes next, but I know I want to help. I want to make things right." Ethan nodded, his gaze fixed on her with a mix of admiration and sadness. He understood. He knew that the war was over, but their fight had only just begun. The world would need to rebuild, and humanity would need to learn from their experiences. The scars of war were deep, but they had a chance to heal, to grow stronger. And Zara would be there to help them, to guide them through the darkness, just as she had helped Ethan through his darkest hours. As they stood there, in the quiet aftermath of the battle, Ethan realized how much his life had changed. He wasn't the same person who had gone to bed as a student just a few weeks ago. He had seen the depths of destruction, felt the sting of loss, and faced the unimaginable. But through it all, he had learned what it meant to be a hero, not because of the title, but because of the actions he had taken, the sacrifices he had made, and the people he had fought beside. He had seen firsthand what humanity was capable of, how, even in the face of overwhelming odds, they could rise to meet any challenge. But more than that, he had learned that it was the bond between people, the connections that transcended race and background, that made them truly powerful. And now, as the dust settled and the city began to heal, he knew that humanity would be stronger for it. The future was uncertain, but he was no longer afraid. He had witnessed the impossible, and that gave him the strength to face whatever came next. But it wasn't over yet. The victory was theirs, but Zara's path was different. Her journey was just beginning. As she turned to face him one last time, her expression softened. The time had come for her to leave. "Ethan," she began, her voice steady but tinged with sadness, "I need to go. There's still much to do. My people, they still need help. I can't stay here, not now. But that doesn't mean this is the end." Ethan's heart sank at her words, but he understood. He knew she had to return to her people, to help them rebuild, to make amends for the mistakes of the past. He knew that they couldn't stay together, not now, not with the future so uncertain. He reached out, taking her hand in his, and for a moment, the world seemed to pause around them. "I understand," he said softly, "but I won't forget what we did together, what we fought for. You'll always have a place here, Zara." Zara smiled faintly, a mixture of gratitude and sadness in her eyes. "And you will always have a place in my heart, Ethan. What we've done here, it's bigger than us. This is just the beginning, not the end." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, intricate token, a symbol of her people's alliance. It was a small, glowing crystal that shimmered with an otherworldly light. She placed it in Ethan's hand, her fingers lingering for a moment longer than necessary. "This is for you," she said, her voice soft but firm. "A symbol of our bond, of everything we've done." Ethan took the crystal, holding it carefully in his hand. He could feel its power, the weight of the promise it held. He knew it was a token of peace, but more than that, it was a reminder of everything they had fought for, the hope for a future where humanity and Zara's people could work together, where the galaxy could heal from the wounds of war. As Zara turned to leave, Ethan watched her go. The bond between them was stronger than any distance, any separation. They had shared something that would never fade, something that would always connect them. "This isn't the end," Zara said one last time, her voice carrying across the wind. "It's just the beginning." And with that, she disappeared into the horizon, leaving behind a world that would never be the same again. Ethan stood there, holding the crystal in his hand, knowing that the future was full of uncertainty. But for the first time, he was ready to face it.